The galaxy was old, older than most species could understand. Civilizations had risen and fallen like waves on a shore, leaving behind only ruins and stories. And of all the stories told across 10,000 worlds, none were stranger than the tales of humanity. Scholar Orrin sat alone in the Vethkai archive, surrounded by data crystals that glowed with soft blue light. He was old now, even by the standards of his long-lived species. His scales had faded from bright green to pale gray. His eyes, once sharp enough to read text from across a room, now needed mechanical help to focus. But his mind remained clear, and his obsession remained strong. For 300 years, Orrin had studied the human myth. Most scholars laughed at him. They called him a fool who wasted his life chasing ghosts. The young academics at the great universities wrote papers explaining why the human stories were nothing more than primitive legends created by ancient species to explain natural disasters. Humans, they said, never existed. They were imaginary monsters invented to scare children. But Orrin knew better. He picked up a data crystal from his desk and held it to the light. Inside this crystal was a recording made by the Vethkai people 12,000 years ago. It showed a ship unlike anything the modern galaxy had ever built. The ship was dark and angular, covered in strange symbols that no translation program could read. And standing on the bridge of that ship was a creature that matched every description in the old texts. 2 arms, 2 legs, soft skin without scales or shells, eyes that looked forward like a predator, a mouth full of flat teeth that could eat both meat and plants. A human. The recording was only 30 seconds long. It showed the human speaking words that had been lost to time. Then the ship turned and vanished into the darkness between stars. The Vethkai, who made that recording, had written a single note. They are leaving. They say they will not return unless we need them. I do not know if this is a promise or a threat. Orrin set down the crystal and rubbed his tired eyes. He had spent his entire career trying to make the Concord of 12 understand the truth. Humanity was real. They had existed. They had built an empire that spanned half the galaxy. And then, for reasons no one fully understood, they had disappeared. Not died. Not been destroyed. Disappeared. The old texts were clear about this. Humanity chose to leave. They packed up their civilization, gathered their people, and flew into a region of space that no other species dared enter. The Forbidden Reach, it was called now. A vast section of the galaxy where ships vanished and signals died. Every species had learned to avoid it. Maps marked it with warnings. Pilots told horror stories about friends who had tried to explore it and never returned. Orrin believed humanity lived there still, waiting, watching. A soft chime interrupted his thoughts. Someone was calling him through the archive's communication system. He waved his hand to accept the call, and a holographic image appeared above his desk. It was Counselor Veth, one of the few members of the Concord who still took Orrin's research seriously. She was a tall female of the Kethari species, with silver fur and 4 arms that she used to gesture constantly when she spoke. "Scholar Orrin," she said, her voice tight with worry. "I need your help. What has happened?" Orrin asked. "The deep space sensors detected something 3 hours ago. A signal coming from the Forbidden Reach. The science team say it matches no known communication pattern. But when I saw the frequency analysis..." She paused and took a breath. "I remembered something from your lectures. You showed us a chart of ancient human communication frequencies." Orrin felt his old heart begin to beat faster. "Send me the data." The hologram flickered, and numbers began scrolling across his desk display. Orrin studied them with growing excitement. The frequency patterns were not exact matches to his ancient records, but they were close. Very close. Close enough that they could not be coincidence. "This is human," he whispered. or something using human technology. After all these years, what does it mean? Counselor Veth asked. I do not know. The old text describes several types of human signals. Some were friendly greetings. Others were warnings. And some... He stopped. Some were what? Some were what the ancient species called death songs. Signals that humans broadcast before they went to war. But surely that cannot be what this is. We have done nothing to anger them. We did not even know they still existed. Counselor Veth's silver fur rippled with anxiety. The Concord needs to know about this. Can you come to the capital and present your findings? Of course. But Counselor, you must understand that most of the Concord thinks I am a senile old fool. They will not listen to me. Then we must make them listen. If humanity is real, if they are still out there, we need to be prepared. Oren nodded slowly. I will leave tonight. The journey to the Concord capital took 4 days. Oren spent most of that time reviewing his research, organizing his evidence, and preparing his arguments. He knew he would face skepticism and mockery. The Concord was made up of 12 species, each with their own interests and prejudices. Getting them to agree on anything was difficult. Getting them to believe in ancient legends would be nearly impossible. The capital world of Nexus Prime was a gleaming sphere of towers and transit tubes, home to billions of beings from across the galaxy. Oren's shuttle landed at the diplomatic quarter, where Counselor Veth was waiting for him. The full Concord has assembled, she said as she led him through the corridors. But I must warn you, the mood is not favorable. Supreme Commander Torvax of the Vraxian hegemony has been speaking against you. Oren sighed. The Vraxians were the most aggressive of the 12. They believed in strength and conquest. Their military was the largest in the Concord, and they constantly pushed for expansion into new territories. Of course, Torvax would oppose anything that might suggest caution or restraint. The Concord chamber was a massive circular room with seats arranged in tiers around a central speaking platform. Representatives from all 12 species filled the seats, their attention focused on Oren as he walked to the center. Supreme Commander Torvax was already standing, his massive reptilian body covered in ceremonial armor. He pointed one clawed finger at Oren. This is the great expert you have brought us. Torvax's voice boomed through the chamber. A dusty old scholar who has spent his life studying fairy tales? The Concord has real problems to address. We should not waste time on ghost stories. The signal from the Forbidden's Reach is not a ghost story, Oren replied calmly. It is real. It is measurable. And it matches patterns recorded by our ancestors 12,000 years ago. Patterns that you interpret however you wish, Torvax said. You see humans everywhere because you wanted to see them. Your entire career depends on them being real. Murmurs of agreement came from several sections of the chamber. Oren had expected this. I understand your skepticism, he said. I have faced it my entire life. But please, look at the evidence with open minds. He activated his data display, and images began floating above the speaking platform. These are recordings from 12 different ancient species, all describing the same creatures. Beings from a harsh world who evolved as persistent predators. They did not have claws or venom or natural armor. Instead, they had endurance. They could chase prey for days without stopping. They could survive injuries that would kill other species. And they had minds that could solve any problem, build any tool, adapt to any environment. Primitive legends, Torvax said. Every species has stories about ancient monsters. These are not monster stories. These are historical records. Trading agreements. Diplomatic messages. Scientific exchanges. Orm brought up more images. The ancient Vethkai traded medicine with humans for 300 years. The first Cathari star maps were based on human navigation data. Even your own ancestors, Supreme Commander, received their first faster-than-light technology from human engineers. Torvax's scales flushed with anger. That is Vraxian propaganda created by enemies who wish to diminish our achievements. We developed our technology through our own genius. The records say otherwise. But that is not why I am here. Oren changed the display to show the signal analysis. 3 days ago, sensors detected this transmission from the Forbidden's reach. The frequency, the modulation pattern, the underlying structure, all of it matches human communication protocols from the old texts. Something in the reach is broadcasting. And whatever it is using human technology. The chamber fell silent. Even Torvax seemed momentarily uncertain. Counselor Veth stood. If Scholar Orn is correct, this could be the most significant discovery in 10,000 years. We should send a diplomatic mission to investigate. Or, Torvax said slowly, we should send a military expedition to secure whatever resources the Reach contains. If there are beings in that region, they have no legal claim to the territory. The Concord has never recognized any sovereignty in the Forbidden's reach. Because no one has ever returned from there, another counselor said. Because no one has ever sent a proper fleet, Torvax replied. Small exploration ships disappeared because they were weak. A full Vraxian battle group would be different. We have 300 warships ready to deploy. If there are hostile forces in the Reach, we will crush them. If there are only resources, we will claim them for the glory of the Concord. Orn felt cold. Supreme Commander Torvax stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Crimson Fury, watching the stars streak past as his fleet traveled through hyperspace. 300 warships followed behind him, the largest military force the Vraxian hegemony had ever assembled for a single mission. Each ship carried hundreds of soldiers, thousands of weapons, and enough firepower to reduce a planet to ash. He felt pride swelling in his chest. This was what the Vraxians were meant to do: conquer, expand, prove their strength to the galaxy. The other species of the Concord were soft and weak, always talking about diplomacy and cooperation. They had forgotten that the universe belonged to those strong enough to take it. How long until we reached the Forbidden's Reach? He asked his navigation officer. 6 hours, Supreme Commander. We will exit hyperspace at the outer boundary. 6 hours. Then the myths would be exposed as lies, and Torvax would claim whatever treasures lay hidden in that Forbidden's territory. If there were ancient ruins, the Vraxians would study them. If there were resources, the Vraxians would harvest them. And if there were any creatures foolish enough to resist, the Vraxians would destroy them. He thought about the old scholar who had tried to warn the Concord. What was his name? Oren, a pathetic creature who had wasted his life studying legends. Torvax had seen fear in the old fool's eyes, genuine terror at the thought of entering the Reach. But fear was for the weak. The strong did not hide from shadows and stories. Supreme Commander, his communications officer said, we are receiving a message from the Concord capital. Counselor Veth is requesting to speak with you. Torvax waved his clawed hand dismissively. I have nothing to say to her. She voted against this mission. She can watch from safety while real warriors do the work that matters. The journey continued in silence. Torvax used the time to review his battle plans, study his maps, and dream of the glory that awaited him. He imagined returning to the Concord as a hero, his ships loaded with alien technology and precious materials. The other species would have to acknowledge Vraxian superiority. They would have to admit that courage and strength mattered more than caution and fear. 6 hours passed quickly. The fleet emerged from hyperspace at the edge of the Forbidden's Reach, and Torvax got his first look at the legendary territory. It was empty. It was empty. Just stars and darkness and the cold void of space, no different from any other region of the galaxy. No monster ships waiting to attack. No ancient defenses blocking their path. Nothing but silence. Torvax laughed. So much for the terrible Forbidden Reach. The legend spoke of instant death for any who entered. I see only empty space. His officers joined in his laughter, relief mixing with excitement. They had all grown up hearing stories about this place. Stories of ships that vanished without trace. Stories of strange signals and impossible phenomena. But now that they were here, they saw nothing to fear. All ships, advance into the Reach, Torvax ordered. Standard exploration formation. Scan everything. Report anything unusual. The fleet moved forward, 300 ships spreading out in a careful pattern designed to cover maximum area while maintaining combat readiness. Sensor beams swept through the darkness, searching for planets, resources, and any sign of the humans who supposedly lived here. The first day passed without incident. The second day brought nothing but more empty space. By the third day, Torvax was beginning to feel disappointed. He had hoped for some discovery, some treasure, something to justify the expense and effort of this mission. Instead, he found only void. Perhaps the Reach is empty after all, his second-in-command suggested. Perhaps the humans really are just legends, and the ancient species exaggerated the dangers to keep others away. Perhaps, Torvax agreed. But we will continue searching. We have come too far to turn back without results. On the fourth day, the sensors found something. Supreme Commander. The sensor officer's voice was high with excitement. We are detecting a massive structure approximately 2 light hours ahead. Initial readings suggest it is artificial. Very artificial. Finally, Torvax leaned forward in his command chair. Show me. The main view screen flickered, and an image appeared. It was a station of some kind, but unlike anything Torvax had ever seen. The structure was enormous, larger than most space stations in Concord territory. Its surface was dark and angular, covered in geometric patterns that seemed to shift and change as the sensors tried to focus on them. Strange lights pulsed along its edges, following rhythms that made no logical sense. What is that? Someone whispered. Our prize, Torvax said. Whatever species built that station clearly had advanced technology. We will claim it for the hegemony. All ships advance to intercept coordinates. Prepare boarding parties. The fleet moved toward the station, sensors scanning continuously for any sign of defense systems or hostile activity. There was nothing. The station just floated there, silent and still, waiting for them to approach. They were halfway to the station when the darkness came alive. At first, Torvax thought his sensors were malfunctioning. The screen showed thousands of new contacts appearing from nowhere, emerging from the void itself like ghosts taking physical form. But ghosts did not register on military sensors. Ghosts did not have mass and energy signatures. Ghosts did not move in perfect formation. What is happening? He demanded. Unknown ships, Supreme Commander. Thousands of them. They are coming from all directions. The view screen switched to a visual feed, and Torvax felt his blood turn cold. The ships emerging from the darkness were like nothing in any Concord database. They were sleek and angular, built from materials that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Each ship was covered in the same strange symbols he had seen on the station. And they were moving together with perfect coordination, surrounding the Vraxian fleet like predators circling wounded prey. How many? Torvax asked, his voice barely steady. We have counted over 12,000 so far, Supreme Commander. And more are still appearing. 12,000 ships, against his 300. Torvax had never faced odds like this. No one in the Concord had ever faced odds like this. Can we retreat? They've already surrounded us. Our only exit route is blocked by at least 4,000 vessels. One of the alien ships moved ahead of the others, approaching the Vraxian flagship. It was larger than the rest, clearly a command vessel of some kind. As it drew closer, Torvax could see more details. The hull was scarred and weathered, marked by what looked like centuries of use. But the weapons mounted along its surface were clearly functional, and they were pointed directly at the Crimson Fury. A communication signal came through, overriding all other frequencies. A voice spoke in perfect Vraxian, without accent or error. "Attention, Vraxian fleet. This is Admiral Yuki Tanaka of the Human Defense Collective. You have entered restricted space without authorization. You have ignored warnings that have stood for 10,000 years. You will withdraw immediately, or you will face the consequences of your actions." Human. The word echoed in Torvax's mind like a death sentence. The legends were true. Humanity was real, and he had just led his entire fleet into their territory. "This is Supreme Commander Torvax of the Vraxian hegemony," he replied, trying to keep his voice steady. "The Concord of 12 does not recognize any claim to this region of space. You will allow us to pass, or we will use force." There was a long pause. When the human admiral spoke again, her voice was calm, but carried an edge of something that might have been sadness. "Supreme Commander, I am going to explain something to you, and I need you to listen carefully. Your fleet has 300 ships. We have shown you 12,000, but those are just the ships we chose to reveal. The total strength of the Human Defense Collective is classified, but I can tell you that we could destroy your entire fleet in the time it takes you to give an order. We could destroy every ship in the Concord combined, and we would not even need to call for reinforcements. You expect me to believe that? I expect you to look at your sensors. Look at the energy readings from our ships. Look at the weapon signatures. Compare them to anything in your database. Then tell me if you think I am bluffing." Torvax looked. His officers looked. The readings made no sense. The power output from a single human ship was greater than his entire fleet combined. Their weapons operated on principles that Vraxian science could not even identify. And their shields generated interference patterns that his targeting systems could not lock onto. "This is not possible," his weapons officer whispered. "These readings are not possible." They were hiding, Torvax realized. All this time. 10,000 years. They were right here, watching us, and we never knew. Admiral Tanaka spoke again. "We left the galaxy because we chose peace over conquest. We stayed hidden because we hoped the younger species would learn to cooperate without us. But we never stopped watching. We know about your wars, your cruelties, your ambitions. We know about the species you have conquered and the worlds you have destroyed. And until now, we chose not to interfere. Until now? Until you came here. Until you ignored every warning and invaded our home. You have forced us to show ourselves, Supreme Commander. You have forced us to make a choice. And now you must make one too." Torvax felt sweat forming on his scales. "What choice?" Admiral Yuki Tanaka stood on the observation deck of her flagship, the Eternal Vigil, watching the crippled Vraxian fleet drift slowly toward the exit point. Her officers had done their work perfectly. Not a single alien life had been lost, but every offensive weapon in that fleet had been reduced to scrap metal. She felt tired. Not physically tired, but tired in her soul. 10,000 years of watching. 10,000 years of hoping that the younger species would learn to live in peace. And now this. Admiral? Her second-in-command, Captain Hiroshi Chun, approached with a data tablet. "The Vraxian fleet is moving out of the reach. Estimated time to Concord space is approximately 3 weeks with their damaged engines." "Good. Make." Sure, our ships stay out of visual range, but continue monitoring. I want to know the moment they make contact with anyone. Yes, Admiral. Hiroshi hesitated. Permission to speak freely? Always. Some of the crew are wondering why we showed ourselves at all. We could have let them explore the outer reaches without revealing our presence. We have hidden from larger fleets before. Tanaka nodded slowly. We could have. But they were heading directly toward the archive station. Another day, and they would have stumbled onto the main colonies. We had no choice. Do you think they will listen? The warning, I mean. Do you think the Concorde will choose peace? Tanaka turned to look at her old friend. Hiroshi was young by human standards, only 200 years old, born long after the withdrawal. He had never seen the galaxy the way it used to be. He had never witnessed what humanity was capable of when pushed too far. I hope so, she said quietly. But hope is not a strategy. Send a message to the Council of Elders. Tell them what happened here. Tell them we need to prepare for the possibility that the Concorde will not listen. The message traveled through secure channels that no Concorde technology could detect. Within hours, it reached every human settlement in the Reach. Within days, the Council of Elders had assembled for the first time in 3 centuries. The council met in the Great Hall on Earth. Not the original Earth, of course. That world had been left behind during the withdrawal, abandoned to heal from the wounds that humanity had inflicted upon it. But humans have built a new Earth in the heart of the Reach, a perfect replica of their homeworld created from memory and longing. Mountains and oceans and forests and cities, all exactly as they had been before the ancient wars. Admiral Tanaka stood before the council, which consisted of the 12 oldest humans still alive. Each of them was over 5,000 years old. Each of them remembered the wars that had driven humanity into exile. And each of them carried the weight of those memories like chains around their hearts. Elder Nakamura, the oldest of them all, spoke first. His voice was thin and wavering, but his mind was still sharp. You showed our ships to the outsiders. You revealed our presence after 10,000 years of hiding. Explain. I had no choice, Elder. The Vraxian fleet was heading toward core territory. If I had let them continue, they would have discovered our colonies, our families, our children. I made a tactical decision to stop them before that happened. A tactical decision that has now exposed us to the entire galaxy. Yes, another elder, a woman named Kenji, leaned forward. What did you tell them? The truth? That we withdrew because we chose peace. That we have been watching them. That we do not wish to fight. I gave them a chance to leave without bloodshed. And they refused. Their commander refused. He ordered an attack despite knowing he was vastly outmatched. We disabled his fleet without taking any lives. Then we let them go, with a message for the Concorde. Elder Nakamura closed his eyes. The same pattern. Always the same pattern. We try to avoid conflict. We offer peace. And they choose violence anyway. Not all of them, Tanaka said. The signal we detected was sent by a Concorde official who was trying to warn them about us. There are beings in the Concorde who remember the old stories. There are beings who want peace. And there are beings like this Torvax who want only conquest. Tanaka nodded. Yes, there are always beings like Torvax. The council fell silent. Tanaka knew what they were thinking about. They were remembering the last time humanity had faced beings like Torvax. The Greth Dominion had been even more aggressive than the Vraxians. They had attacked human colony worlds without warning, killed millions of innocent people, and declared that they would not stop until humanity was extinct. Humanity had tried diplomacy. They had tried negotiation. They had tried everything they could think of to avoid war. But the Greth would not stop. So humanity had stopped them. The war lasted 7 years. When it ended, The Greth Dominion no longer existed. Not defeated, not conquered, erased. Every Greth world reduced to radioactive rubble. Every Greth ship destroyed. Every Greth being killed without exception. It was the most complete genocide in galactic history. And humanity had done it efficiently, methodically, and without mercy. That was when the nightmares began. Not for the victims, who were all dead, but for the victors. Humans looked at what they had done and felt horror. They had become exactly what they were fighting against. They had become monsters. The withdrawal followed. Humanity gathered its people, packed up its civilization, and fled to the farthest corner of the galaxy. They built the Reach as a sanctuary, a place where they could live in peace and never again be tempted to use their terrible capabilities. They left warnings for the other species, telling them to stay away, telling them that humanity wanted only to be left alone. For 10,000 years, the warnings had worked. Until now. Elder Nakamura opened his eyes. "What do you recommend, Admiral?" "We wait. We watch. We see how the Concord responds to the warning. If they choose peace, we can begin a careful process of reintegration. Slowly sharing knowledge. Building trust. Perhaps in time, rejoining the galactic community. And if they choose war?" Tanaka's jaw tightened. "Then we do what we have always done. We protect our people. We defend our home. And we pray that this time we can find a way to win without losing ourselves." The council voted unanimously to follow her recommendation. But as Tanaka left the Great Hall, she felt the weight of history pressing down on her shoulders. She had studied the ancient records. She knew that every previous attempt at contact had ended in disaster. The galaxy seemed determined to prove that violence was inevitable. But she also knew that humans had changed in the 10,000 years since the withdrawal. They had built a civilization based on cooperation and compassion. They had raised generations of children who had never known war. They had proven, at least to themselves, that they could be more than killers. The question now was whether they could prove it to everyone else. 3 weeks later, the crippled Raxian fleet reached Concord space. Supreme Commander Torvax transmitted his report to the capital world, and within hours, the news had spread to every corner of the Concord. Humanity was real. The reaction was exactly as divided as Tanaka had feared. Some species called for immediate war, demanding that the Concord gather every ship and launch an assault on the Reach. Others called for diplomacy, arguing that humanity had shown mercy by not destroying the Vraxian fleet. And others simply panicked, convinced that ancient monsters were coming to destroy them all. Scholar Orrin watched the chaos from his small room at the archive, feeling vindicated and terrified at the same time. Everything he had spent his life studying had been proven true. But that proof had come at a terrible cost. The galaxy was now gripped by fear, and fear made people do stupid things. Councilor Veth contacted him again. "The Concord is meeting an emergency session. They want you there. They want to understand what we are dealing with." "I will come," Orrin said. "But I must warn you, Counselor. The old texts contain information that many will not want to hear. Such as the true reason humanity withdrew. They did not flee from enemies. They fled from themselves. They were afraid of their own capacity for violence. And if the Concord pushes them too far, what will happen?" Orrin looked at the data crystal in his hand, the one that contained the only surviving footage of a human warship. The text described a human saying. They called it the philosophy of the sleeping giant. A giant that sleeps is harmless. A giant that wakes is dangerous. But a giant that is forced to wake against its will is what? Is apocalyptic. Counselor Veth's fur rippled with fear. "Then we must convince the Concord to let them sleep." "Yes," Orrin agreed. "We must. Because if we wake them fully, If we force them to fight, then nothing in this galaxy will be able to stop them. Not our fleets, not our weapons, not even our surrender. The old texts are very clear about this, Counselor. Humanity does not fight to win. They fight to end. And ending, for them, means making absolutely certain that the threat can never rise again. He set down the crystal and began preparing for his journey to the capital. The fate of the galaxy might depend on whether anyone would listen to a dusty old scholar who had spent his life studying legends. He hoped, desperately, that they would. But deep in his heart, he feared that they would not. The Concord Chamber had never been so full. Representatives from all 12 species filled every seat, and thousands more watched through holographic feeds across the galaxy. The mood was tense, divided between those calling for war and those begging for caution. Scholar Aaron stood at the center of the speaking platform, surrounded by data displays showing ancient texts, sensor readings, and historical records. Counselor Veth had arranged for him to have the floor for as long as he needed, but he knew that his audience was hostile. Supreme Commander Torvax sat in the front row, his scales still flushed with shame and anger from his defeat. "Thank you for allowing me to speak," Aaron began. "I know that many of you consider my research to be the work of a fool chasing legends. But the events of the past month have proven that the legends are true. Humanity exists. They have revealed themselves. And now we must decide how to respond. We should attack immediately," Torvax growled, "before they can attack us first. With respect, Supreme Commander, you already tried that approach. Your fleet of 300 ships was disabled in 11 minutes without inflicting any damage on the enemy. What makes you think a larger fleet would achieve different results?" Murmurs spread through the chamber. Torvax's scales flushed darker, but he did not respond. Oren continued. "The texts I have studied span 12,000 years of galactic history. They contain records from dozens of species who encountered humanity during what they called the Age of Stars. These records paint a picture of a species unlike any other in the galaxy. A species that evolved on a world so dangerous that simply surviving required extraordinary abilities. Humans are persistent predators. They can run for days without stopping. They can survive wounds that would kill any of us. They can adapt to almost any environment. Physical abilities mean nothing against superior weapons," another representative said. "That is exactly what the Greth Dominion believed." Oren brought up a new display, showing a map of a region of space that was now empty. The Greth were the dominant military power of their age. They had conquered dozens of worlds and enslaved hundreds of species. When they encountered humanity, they assumed that these soft, shell-less creatures would be easy prey. He paused, letting the silence build. The Greth War lasted 7 years. When it ended, there was no Greth Dominion. There were no Greth worlds. There were no Greth beings. The entire species had been erased from existence. Not conquered, not occupied, erased. Every world they had ever touched was reduced to ash. Every ship they had ever built was destroyed. Every Greth, down to the last child, was killed. The chamber fell completely silent. Humanity did not do this in anger or hatred, Aaron continued. They did it with cold, calculated efficiency. The Greth had attacked human colonies without warning, killing millions of innocent people. Humanity tried to negotiate peace. The Greth refused. Humanity offered surrender terms. The Greth laughed. So humanity decided that the only way to end the threat permanently was to end the Greth. Permanently. That is genocide, someone whispered. Yes, and it is the reason humanity withdrew from the galaxy. Aaron changed the display to show up, recording from the aftermath of the Greth War. It showed human ships gathering above a burning world, their crews standing in silence. They were horrified by what they had done. They looked at the destruction they had caused, and they saw monsters staring back at them. Not the Greth themselves. They realized that their capacity for violence was too great. They could not trust themselves to exist among other species without eventually destroying them. Elder Councilor Marketh, the oldest member of the Concord, raised his hand. Scholar Aaron, you were saying that humanity chose isolation because they were afraid of themselves?
Yes, Elder. That is exactly what I am saying.
Humanity withdrew to the Forbidden's reach, not because they were weak, but because they were too strong. They built a civilization based on peace and cooperation, and they stayed hidden for 10,000 years, hoping that the younger species would learn to live together without needing human intervention. But they revealed themselves to Supreme Commander Torvax, because he invaded their territory, because he ignored every warning, because he gave them no choice. Aaron turned to face Torvax directly. When Admiral Tanaka told you to leave, she was not bluffing. She was not negotiating. She was begging you, in the only way her honor would allow, to turn around before you forced her to take action. Torvax stood, his massive body trembling with fury. She destroyed my fleet. She humiliated the Vraxian hegemony. She disabled your weapons without killing a single one of your soldiers. She let you go home to warn us. She showed more mercy than you deserve, Supreme Commander, because the alternative was what she did to the Greth. Oren let that sink in. Admiral Tanaka could have destroyed your entire fleet in seconds. She could have killed everyone aboard and left nothing but debris. She chose not to. She chose to give us a chance. The question is whether we are wise enough to take it. The chamber erupted in argument. Some representatives demanded immediate military action. Others called for diplomatic missions. A few suggested surrender. Councilor Veth stood and shouted for order, but the noise only grew louder through it all. Orange stood quietly at the speaking platform, watching the chaos with tired eyes. He had done everything he could. He had shared the knowledge he had spent 300 years gathering. Now the decision rested with beings who might be too afraid or too proud to make the right choice. Finally, Elder Councilor Marketh raised his hand again. The chamber slowly fell silent. Scholar Oren, Marketh said, you have studied humanity for longer than most of us have been alive. If we choose to approach them peacefully, what would you recommend? Send a message first. A simple message expressing a desire for dialogue. Do not send warships. Do not make demands. Do not try to negotiate from a position of strength, because we have no strength compared to them. Show them that we have learned from Supreme Commander Torvax's mistake. Show them that we want peace, and if they refuse, then we accept their refusal and leave them alone. We stay out of the Forbidden's reach. We focus on building our own civilization. We prove, through our actions over decades and centuries, that we can be trusted. And we hope that someday they will be willing to try again. That could take thousands of years. Humanity has already waited 10,000 years. They are patient. They have proven that. The question is whether we can be patient too. The vote was called. It was closer than Oren had hoped, but in the end, the moderates prevailed. The Concord would send a diplomatic message to humanity, expressing their desire for peaceful contact. No warships would approach the Reach. No demands would be made. As the chamber emptied, Councilor Veth approached Oren. You did well, old friend. You may have saved the galaxy today. Perhaps, Oren said wearily. But I've also lived long enough to know that decisions like this can be overturned. There are still those who want war. Torvax and his allies will not stop pushing. And if they succeed, if they convince the Concord to attack, then we will face the consequences. No, humanity will face the consequences. and I do not think you understand what that means." Aaron gathered his data crystals and began walking toward the exit. The old texts contain a phrase that humans used to describe their approach to war. They called it proportional response. When someone hurt them, they hurt back exactly as much. Not more, not less. Just equal. That seems reasonable. It would be, except that humans do not measure proportion the way we do. When the Greth killed human colonists, humanity did not kill an equal number of Greth. They decided that the proportion was measured by removing the ability to cause future harm. And the only way to remove the Greth's ability to cause future harm was to remove the Greth entirely. Counselor Veth's fur stood on end. "You are saying that if we attack them..." "I am saying that if we attack them and give them reason to believe we will never stop, they will make sure we can never attack them again. Not by conquering us. Not by occupying our worlds. By ending us. Every species in the Concord. Every ship. Every city. Every individual. Completely and permanently. Just like the Greth." He reached the exit and paused, looking back at the now empty chamber. The old texts describe humanity in many ways: kind, curious, creative, compassionate. They have so many virtues that sometimes we forget what they truly are. But underneath all of that kindness, underneath all of that compassion, there is something else. Something that made them the apex predators of their world. Something that drove them to conquer every environment, defeat every rival, and spread across the stars. What? Oren's old eyes were filled with something very close to fear. "They are survivors, Counselor. Above everything else, they are survivors. And survivors do whatever it takes to survive. Whatever it takes. Remember that in the days ahead. Remember what they are willing to do. And remember that every decision we make, every choice we offer them, could be the difference between a future of peace and a future of ashes." He turned and walked away, leaving Counselor Veth alone with the weight of what she had learned. Outside the chamber windows, the stars burned cold and distant. And somewhere in the darkness of the Forbidden's reach, humanity was waiting to see what the galaxy would choose: peace or war, cooperation or conflict, life or extinction. The diplomatic message traveled across the void for 7 days before reaching human sensors. It was simple, as Scholar Arn had recommended. Just a greeting, an expression of peaceful intentions, and a request for dialogue. No demands. No ultimatums. No threats. Admiral Yuki Tanaka read the message in her quarters aboard the Eternal Vigil. She read it 3 times, searching for hidden meanings or subtle traps. She found none. It was exactly what it appeared to be: a genuine attempt at communication. For the first time in months, she felt something like hope. The Council of Elders debated for 2 weeks before reaching a decision. They would accept the Concord's request for dialogue. They would send a single ship, unarmed, to the Concord capital. And they would send Admiral Tanaka to speak on humanity's behalf. "You understand the risk," Elder Nakamura told her before she departed. "If this is a trap, you will be surrounded by beings who fear and hate us." "I understand," Tanaka replied. "But someone has to take the first step. Someone has to show them that we are more than the monsters in their legends. And if you fail?" Tanaka smiled sadly. "Then we will know that peace was never possible, and we will prepare for what comes next." The journey to Concord space took 3 weeks. Tanaka used the time to study everything available about the 12 species of the Concord. Their cultures, their values, their histories. She wanted to understand them as individuals, not just as potential enemies. The diplomatic ship emerged from hyperspace at the edge of Nexus Prime system. It was immediately surrounded by hundreds of Concord warships, their weapons powered and ready. Tanaka felt the familiar cold of danger running down her spine, but she kept her voice calm when she spoke to her crew. Hold position. Do not activate any defensive systems. We came here in peace, and we will act like it. For 6 tense hours, the ship waited while the Concorde leaders debated whether to let them approach. Finally, clearance was granted. The human ship flew slowly toward the capital, surrounded by an escort of armed vessels that made their mistrust very clear. Tanaka landed at the diplomatic quarter and stepped out onto the platform alone. She wore no armor, carried no weapons, just a simple uniform that bore the symbols of the Human Defense Collective. A delegation was waiting for her. Counselor Veth stood at the front, her silver fur rippling with anxiety. Behind her were representatives from all 12 species, including Supreme Commander Torvax, who glared at Tanaka with barely contained hatred. And at the edge of the group, leaning on a walking stick, was an old alien with faded green scales and tired eyes. Scholar Orn had come to see the legends made real. Admiral Tanaka, Counselor Veth said formally. On behalf of the Concorde of 12, I welcome you to Nexus Prime. Thank you, Counselor. I am honored to be here. If you will follow me, the full Concorde has assembled to hear what you have to say. The walk to the Concorde chamber felt like the longest of Tanaka's life. She could feel the eyes of thousands of beings watching her, studying her, trying to understand what kind of creature she was. She kept her head high and her pace steady. She had faced worse than this. She had faced war and death and the nightmare of the Greth. She could face a room full of frightened politicians. The chamber was enormous, filled with representatives from across the galaxy. Tanaka walked to the speaking platform and stood where Scholar Oren had stood just weeks before. She looked out at the sea of alien faces and took a deep breath. My name is Yuki Tanaka. I am an admiral in the Human Defense Collective, and I have been authorized by the Council of Elders to speak on behalf of all humanity. Thank you for agreeing to meet with me. You have a lot to explain, Torvax growled from his seat. You destroyed my fleet. I disabled your weapons. I did not destroy anything that could not be repaired, and I did not take any lives. Tanaka met his eyes without flinching. If I had wanted to destroy your fleet, Supreme Commander, there would be no one left to complain about it. The chamber murmured at her bluntness. Counselor Veth raised a hand for silence. Admiral, we have asked you here to explain humanity's intentions. We have read the ancient texts. We know about the Greth War. We know why your people withdrew from the galaxy. What we do not know is what you want now. Tanaka nodded. That is a fair question. I will try to give you a fair answer. She took a moment to gather her thoughts, then began. 10,000 years ago, humanity made a choice. We had just fought the most terrible war in galactic history. We had destroyed an entire species, down to the last individual. And when we looked at what we had done, we were horrified. Not because the Greth did not deserve destruction. They did. They had attacked without provocation, killed millions of our people, and refused every offer of peace. By any standard of justice, they had earned their fate. Then why were you horrified? Someone asked. Because we did it so easily. Because when we decided that the Greth needed to die, we made it happen with cold efficiency. We did not lose ourselves to rage or hatred. We simply calculated the most effective way to end the threat, and we executed that calculation perfectly. And that terrified us more than anything the Greth had ever done. She paused, letting the words sink in. We realized that we were too dangerous. Our intelligence, our adaptability, our persistence, our capacity for violence, all of these things combined to make us the most effective killers the galaxy had ever seen. And we could not trust ourselves to use that power wisely. So we left. We withdrew to the farthest corner of the galaxy. We built a new civilization based on peace and cooperation. and we tried to become something better than what we were. Did you succeed? Elder Counselor Marketh asked. Tanaka smiled slightly. I think so. For 10,000 years, we have lived without war. We have raised children who have never known violence. We have built wonders that I wish I could share with you. But we never forgot what we were capable of. We never stopped training, never stopped building ships, never stopped preparing for the day when someone might force us to use our old skills again. And now? Counselor Veth asked. What do you want now? We want to come home. Tanaka's voice was soft but clear. We want to rejoin the galactic community. We want to share our knowledge, our technology, our culture. We want to be neighbors, not legends. We want to help build a better future for everyone. The chamber stirred. Some faces showed hope. Others showed fear. Torvax's face showed only contempt. And what do you want in return? He demanded. Peace. An end to conquest and aggression. Protection for the weak. Justice for all species, not just the strong ones. Tanaka turned to address the full chamber. We will share everything we have, but only with a concord that is committed to cooperation. If you continue to fight each other, if you continue to conquer and enslave, then we will withdraw again and leave you to your own fate. But if you choose peace, truly choose it, then humanity will stand beside you as partners and friends. How can we trust you? Another representative asked. You could destroy us whenever you wanted. Yes, we could. That is exactly why you should trust us. Tanaka spread her hands. We have had the power to conquer this galaxy for 10,000 years. We never used it. We have watched your wars, your cruelties, your failures, and we never intervened. We only revealed ourselves when Supreme Commander Torvax invaded our home and gave us no choice. Every opportunity we had to attack, we refused. Every chance we had to dominate, we turned away. Is that not evidence that we mean what we say? The chamber fell silent. The logic was undeniable. Humanity had proven their commitment to peace through 10,000 years of restraint. What more evidence could anyone ask for? Elder Counselor Marketh rose slowly from his seat. Admiral Tanaka, I have lived for over 800 years. I have seen empires rise and fall. I have seen species destroy themselves through war and greed. And I have never seen anything like what you have described. A people who chose peace not from weakness, but from strength. A people who walked away from power because they feared what they might become. He walked down to the speaking platform and stood before her. If what you say is true, then humanity is not the monster of our legends. You are something far more remarkable. You are proof that any species can change. That violence is not inevitable. That the future can be better than the past. He extended his hand in the traditional gesture of greeting. On behalf of the Concord of 12, I accept your offer of partnership. Let us build that better future together. Tanaka took his hand and felt tears forming in her eyes. 10,000 years of exile. 10,000 years of waiting and watching and hoping. And now, finally, they could come home. Thank you, she whispered. Thank you for choosing wisely. In the seats above, Scholar Aaron watched with tears streaming down his scaled face. He had spent 300 years studying humanity, trying to make others understand that they were real. Now he was watching history being made. He was watching the galaxy take its first steps toward a new age. The vote was not unanimous. Torvax and his allies voted against the partnership, still convinced that humanity was a threat that needed to be destroyed. But they were outnumbered. The majority chose hope over fear. As the chamber emptied, a young delegate approached Tanaka with a question that had been bothering her since the speech began. Admiral, I need to understand something.